to North Hempstead TV. I'm Town Clerk Leslie Gross, and you are really in for a special program this evening. We're here with Howard Kroplick, who's going to talk to us about the Vanderbilt Cup races and the Vanderbilt Motor Parkway, something that many of you may not have ever noticed, but it's all around you. Welcome, Howard.
Oh, thank you, Leslie.
Thank you so much for being here. You've come with all sorts of memorabilia, and you're a local resident. I know you're from East Hills.
Yes.
And you just finished a book. Would you tell us about it?
Yes, the book is Vanderbilt Cup Races of Long Island. It's 127 pages and contains 200 amazing images of Long Island 100 years ago. And it brings some of the history that's long forgotten here on Long Island about events that at the turn of the century that were really dramatic and really had an impact on not only Long Island, but the automobile industry of the United States.
Well, just to frame that, we're now celebrating the 100th anniversary of Town Hall, right on Plandome Road. And what's so interesting to me is these races were happening just about the same time. Town Hall opened in 1907, and these races were going on at the same time.
Exactly. The races were held on Long Island from 1904 to 1910. So it's, again, just when Long Island was just starting to bloom. There were only about 55,000 people living in Nassau and Suffolk County at that time. So it was all farmlands, and some estates were starting to be built at that time.
And the roads at the time were made of dirt, so
That's
we
right.
weren't talking about paved roads.
They weren't paved roads, it was all dirt roads. Jericho Turnpike was the major thoroughfare on Long Island.
And that was part of the Vanderbilt Motor Parkway?
Jericho Turnpike was always a major part of the races. On about 4 of the races, it was the main road that was used. And that's what was really amazing about this, is that for the first 3 years of the race, they were always held on the public roads. And that's what got me first interested when I found out Glen Cove Road was part of a race course. I couldn't believe it. I lived near Glen Cove Road.
Well, talking about that, how did you get interested in studying this? I think you're probably the world's expert on the Vanderbilt Cup races.
Well, I first got interested when I started reading about the Long Island Motor Parkway. The Long Island Motor Parkway was the first road built specifically for automobiles. And there was a tremendous website on that by Sam Berlinger, who I met, and I looked on his website, and he shows exactly where the Motor Parkway was. And I started reading more about it, and I said there were races held on it. I never knew that there were races held on Long Island on the Motor Parkway. So I started doing some research. I was lucky enough to go to the Vanderbilt Museum out in Suffolk County, and they gave me access to the archives of William K. Vanderbilt, Jr. And I thought I'd be able to spend an hour or two there and learn everything I needed to know about the Vanderbilt Cup races on the Long Island Motor Parkway. Well, I've spent many a day out there, and there's still more to learn about the Motor Parkway and the Vanderbilt Cup races. How
long did it take you to research? This is the book.
I think I've been researching the Motor Parkway and the Vanderbilt Cup races for about 4 or 5 years now. In the midst of this, I've collected over 20,000 images of the races, all categorized by the year of the races. I've collected about 2,000 different sources of research on it, and also about 150 memorabilia, which I brought some of it today.
Would you show us some of the things that you brought?
Sure. The one thing about the Vanderbilt Cup races and the Motor Parkway, there's endless supply of memorabilia and collectibles that you can find in auctions, you can find on eBay, or your fellow collectors. And my favorite one is this plaque here. This is a Tiffany plaque. It weighs about 20 pounds. And this was given to the winner of the 1908 race, George Robertson. And this was the only reward they got for winning the race, was they got this plaque. And sometimes they got money from the manufacturer of the car, but this was what they went for, this Tiffany plaque. The Vanderbilt Cup itself was one plaque. They got their name engraved on it, but the manufacturer only held on for 1 year, and then it rotated to the next winner. So this is
So
what
that's
they
what the winner got.
aimed for.
Well, this was a sport of the very rich and very well-to-do. This was not an inexpensive
No,
activity.
the people who entered these races were usually millionaires who had their favorite car, favorite fast car, and they usually had their chauffeur was the race car driver, and these chauffeurs eventually became the professional racers of the day. But some of the early Vanderbilt Cup racers, they made their entrance at the United States, became world-renowned. Louis Chevrolet ran his first international race in the Vanderbilt Cup races. Vincenzo Lancia, again, went on to make the Lancia car, ran in the 1906 races and also the 1905 race.
Well, it's incredible that this all started here. Tell us a little bit about William K. Vanderbilt. I know he, as a student, was able to go to Europe.
Yes.
And got his love of racing in Europe, but how did he bring that back here?
Well, Willie K., as his
Willie
friends
K.
called him, was the great-grandson of Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, and he was heir to the railroad fortune. And he was really a great charismatic character, and there were a lot of different Vanderbilts out there, and they always trying to get their own names out there. And what he loved was automobiles. He loved fast automobiles, and he used to bring in the fastest car from Europe and race it, usually out in Newport, and he'd have races there. And he enjoyed it so much, he actually became a racer in Europe. So in the early 1900s, 1902, 1903, he would race with other racers in Europe in major races, and he'd always do very well because he always had the best car. He'd spend a lot of money. Usually it was a Mercedes car.
Mercedes, that's what I had read.
And then in 1904, he helped organize an event down in Daytona, Ormond Beach, Daytona, and he set the 1 mile speed record going 92 miles per hour. So for a while there, he was the most renowned racer of his day. And it was then in 1904, he decided with a bunch of friends that they would organize the first international race to bring over cars from Europe and compete with the American cars, because he wanted to encourage the American manufacturers to improve the car, because at that time the European cars, the French cars were the best cars. The German cars were great, the Italian cars. The American cars were really lagging behind. So he felt if he organized this race out here on Long Island that he would encourage the American manufacturers to improve their cars.
And did an American car ever win the race?
The first race that was won by American car was the 4th Vanderbilt Cup race, which was held in 1908, and that was done by the Locomobile Company, which was made in Bridgeport, Connecticut, old number 16.
Ah.
And that's this trophy over here.
So the trophy was for the first American car to win the race.
Exactly right.
Wonderful.
And Locomobile was very pleased with their victory. They celebrated it. In fact, here's one of the memorabilia. This is the invitation to a banquet that they had for the winning car and the driver, George Robertson, out in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And at that banquet, they gave out this little trophy here, which was a miniature Vanderbilt Cup. And it has the Locomobile logo on it. And this became a paperweight, too, for anybody who bought a Locomobile. They also had an option that they could put it on their radiator. So you had a radiator mascot. And so anybody who had a Locomobile in 1908, 1909 replaced their radiator mascot with a little mini Vanderbilt Cup.
How many people generally entered these races?
It varied from year to year. The first year there were 18 cars. It was anywhere from 15. In 1910, I think there were about 30 cars entered as well.
Now, the local farmers, I understand, were not too pleased with the races that were going on in the area.
Yes, especially in 1904, the first year of the race. Remember, no automobile race was ever held on the roads before, and Jericho Turnpike was the major road that the farmers brought their goods into the city. So here you had Vanderbilt saying that for a period of time they couldn't use Jericho Turnpike because a race was going to be held on. So the farmers got together and they put a lawsuit to stop the race. And only about 2 days before the race did they rule in favor of Vanderbilt that they could hold a race.